I'm just going to tell you what little bit I know about the ice business and how it started and how the ice was stored and cut and handled during the summer. Our address was 980 South Main. I guess Dad got interested in this business when soon after he was married, because he worked for Evans Ice Company, who manufactured ice on approximately 2nd North and 6th West in Logan. I guess when he got down to the south part of town here and saw a big excavation with nothing in it, it gave him the idea that it could be filled with water for an ice pond. The reason for this big excavation was that someone had excavated about 5 feet deep and about between 1.5 acres and 2 acres of land for the purpose of getting the clay to make brick with. So that's the reason the ice pond was there. Now, when I first remember it as a child, I guess from maybe 6 years and on, that ice pond was always full of tall grass-like pasture in the summertime. Well, it was necessary to cut that long grass with a mower, the same as they cut alfalfa with, and rake it and haul it out of the pond before we'd start filling it with water. After the biggest part of the grass was gone and had been hauled away, then it was necessary to rake the entire pond with hand rakes, garden rakes. And we did this twice to make sure we got all of the loose grass that we possibly could so that it didn't float up into the ice later. So after that was done, then we would start filling the pond with water, maybe the 1st of November or late October. And it would take approximately 5 days to fill the pond, 5 or 6 days. The water would come down the irrigation ditch which ran past the east end of the pond and came from the Logan River. However, no one was using the water in the wintertime except us. So we would have to walk that ditch and clean it and fix the banks or whatever was necessary in order to get the water to come from the river, which was approximately, I would think, 1.5 miles. And this irrigation ditch came out of the Logan River on the north side of River Heights and followed the River Heights hill around to 7th South, and then from there through the fields down to the ice pond. After the pond was full, we would leave the water on all winter long so that it was filling and emptying all the time to keep the water more pure and clean. But just before freeze up, which was usually soon after Thanksgiving, then we would walk around the pond and rake whatever grass the wind had blown to the sides, and it was considerable. You'd get big rakefuls of short grass to rake out. Until the ice started freezing over, usually the kids, myself included, would take garden rakes and walk around the 3 edges of the pond that were open. On the east end there were willows that came right down to the water's edge, and so we never bothered with that. And we would rake this loose ground out on a windy day, loose grass out of the pond on a windy day, because it would blow it over to one side or the other. And as I was saying, you would take out rakefuls of grass, sometimes a half a dozen of them in one place, but there would be some on the entire edge where the wind had blown it. Usually it was the north edge for some reason, where the grass ended up. Well, then soon after that, the ice would start freezing, and usually by Christmas time it was thick enough to allow a horse to walk on the ice, and that had to be about 6 inches thick in order to do that. The horse was the very integral part of the whole ice storing business. They did all the hard work, except there was plenty of other hard work to do. So as the ice would get thicker so that a man or men could get out on it, we would have to keep the snow off of the ice every time it snowed, because the snow insulated the ice from freezing as fast as it would if the snow were removed. Now if you want to see the snow plow that we used to use this is the snow plow we used to remove the snow from off of the ice pond. Here you can see the marks where we have marked the ice before this small snowstorm came. But this ice pond was approximately 2 acres, so it was a big job to scrape all that snow off, going every direction we could with a horse in order to help the ice to freeze thicker. Now here it's at least 6 inches thick, or we wouldn't have the horse out on the ice. As I said, these marks here mark out the blocks of ice. They're approximately, looking down here now, they're approximately 3 feet long, 18 inches wide, and this must have been an exceptionally cold year this year, because that ice, showing this ice block here, is approximately 16 inches thick. What we would do, we had a plow which was like holding on to a garden plow, and except it had a 6-foot blade that went out in front of the handles, and the blades on that plow, each tooth was approximately 6 or 7 inches long and 6 or 8 inches deep, and the teeth ran for approximately 5 or 6 feet horizontal. The plow was also built so that it had a gauge on it, so if we were plowing the width of the block here, approximately 18 inches, we went the full length of the pond, pulling that plow by hand to get the first straight line. Then we would go 90 degrees the other way and go through the center of the pond, pulling the plow by hand, usually 3 of us, and that plow would dig in approximately 2 inches each time it went over. Then, as we got the 2 center marks onto the ice, we would just flip the gauge, the 18-inch gauge, over and plow another strip, full length. Usually we mark the whole pond the first time before it snowed or whatever. And then as the ice was cut to be taken, floated down and into the barn, you had to, what we call, plow the ice without the gauge on. We would get up at approximately 6 o'clock in the morning, 2 hours before daylight, and start plowing these lines, not the full length of the pond, just enough that we knew we would be cutting for that day. And then of course we'd have to go the other way. After going over each line approximately 3 times, the ice would be cut to a depth of about 6 inches. Then usually we would take out about a 20 block strip at a time and cut that 20 block strip all the way full length of the pond in a day or two's time. As we got the channel open, as you can see here, we're cutting ice way up on the east side of the pond, floating it down, hooking it with an ice hook, which these men are holding here. And one man could drag those 20 block sections down, around the corner, and over here to the chutes, where this man would be standing with a flat bar with a blade on it about 5 inches long, and as he hit in between each block where it had been plowed 6 inches deep, those blocks would break off, and this is what you would end up with. A block of approximately 18 inches one way, 3 feet the other way, and whatever the thickness of the ice was. Now, several times as we were starting to fill the barn with ice, we would get a thawing day or a January thaw. and the ice would become spongy, and sometimes the horse would fall through the ice, and the only way to get the horse out of the pond was to cut a 3 to 5 foot channel clear to the edge of the pond, so the horse could swim and walk over to the edge of the pond and walk out. He could not get back up on the ice. In the first place, you couldn't get his front legs up on the ice, and if you had, he would have just broken it off again. I can remember 2 horses that were lost due to hyperthermia from being in the ice pond too long. When they would go in, we'd hurry and cut a channel as quick as we could, get them out, rub them down, take them to the barn, cover them with blankets. But as I remember, 2 of the horses died from hypothermia, from being in the water too long. Okay, now we've got the channel cut. See, they've been putting ice in the barn here a couple or 3 days because they have a channel cut clear to the top of the pond up where those willows are. Now, just a point of interest, see how thin the willows are here at this particular year when we're putting up ice? This here would be approximately 20 or 25 years later, and see how the willows have filled in that 25 years of time. So we know that this was back near the time when they first started to harvest ice for the Natural Ice Company, which our company was named, and which supported the family for approximately 35 years. Normally we would have sawdust piled from about where Harry's standing here entirely across the end of the barn, which was approximately 30 feet, and piled as high as this reinforcing beam is here. These beams went through the barn, 2 of them each way. Here's the other one up here. And they had cables attached to them that went to the other end of the barn and hooked onto another beam similar to this, both this way and this way through the barn. There'd be a terrific pressure once the barn was filled with ice and sawdust, especially in the summer when the sawdust would start settling and getting heavier and heavier with the water from the ice. Now, the ice barn was filled every year from the bottom up to approximately this height here, or as I remember, about 13 layers of ice up on edge. The ice being taken up the chute and quite high up into the barn. So at this point they've probably been cutting ice for 3 or 4 days, and they have the barn filled up to about 2/3 full here. You can see this particular year the ice was extra thick. Normally we would pull 3 blocks of ice in at a time, but being this ice is so thick this year, they're only taking 2. One of the funny things that would happen, every once in a while this hook would slide off after the ice was maybe almost into the barn here. Well, this fellow here had a rope tied to the hook, and he's the one that dropped it down behind these blocks of ice as they came in through the chutes here from the pond. And then as it got to the top and the hook was released from the ice and the ice blocks went sliding in to the center of the barn, then he would pull the hook back down with the rope that he had in his hand here. Now this hook would pull the ice up. There would be a pulley up in the ice barn attached to some heavy beams that we would lean against the side of the barn in order to hold the pulley. Then the cable would go up through this pulley and back down to a post buried in the ground, which stayed there year after year, where there was another pulley. Cable would go through that. There'd be a horse waiting here, and that's what the end of the cable would be hooked to, was the back of a single horse. So the horse would walk out this way, pulling the ice up into the barn, As the hook was released from the ice up here, of course the horse would be out 50 or 60 feet away from the starting point and would turn around again. This fellow would bring the hook back down. These guys would have the ice pulled in here and ready to hook onto again. And that would go on all day long and day after day for 5 or 6 days. Here is another angle of pictures being taken at the same time. And this is the head of the horse that was pulling on the cable and pulling the ice into the barn. Like I was saying, when we would get a thawing day in the middle of January or February, it would cause us a lot of problems. And especially if when this ice was being pulled out, it caused the hook to tear off of the ice, because the ice wouldn't be as hard as it would be on a real cold day. And the blocks of ice would come sailing down that chute, and of course hitting into the water between those two chutes where these men are standing. And so someone would holler loud and clear when that hook came off so that they could get off of the road, or else they'd get water all over them as that ice blocks hit the water. Well, one day a fellow was standing here like this one is now, and he was helping there on the chutes. And this was in 1947, which was the last year that we stored ice. Up until then, the state health department would come and test the ice for purity. It would always test 99 and 9900s pure. But in 1947, we were starting to get environmentalists and that sort of people. And they stopped us from storing ice after 1947 because of the possibility of contaminating the water, being that it was an open pond. By that time, anyway, they were starting to make refrigerators once again after World War II. And so people started buying electric refrigerators. So much larger part of the population then started to have the electric refrigeration. And of course the ice business went downhill and downhill until 1953. When I came home from the service in 1946, Harry, my stepfather, didn't feel like he could run the business any longer. He was quite a heavy fellow, and I think he was more tired than he was unable. But anyway, he did not want anything more to do with the ice business if he had to do it himself. So I volunteered to take over the ice business, even though it wasn't something I necessarily wanted to do, but none of the other boys were interested in doing it. And so I ran the ice business from 1946 to 1953.